All right, here we go. Welcome. Hopefully we're having a great start to our Tuesday here. It is Advisory Tuesday. So I am sporting my University of Minnesota Golden Gopher t-shirt here. It just says homegrown. And so hopefully senior took advantage of some of those breakout rooms. Maybe put into the chat if you did attend one of those breakout rooms, just kind of give me a feedback. How was it? Or unmute and let me know as well. Well, I hope that you took advantage of some of those breakout rooms and connected with a PHS counselor. Again, you know some of the process for going to a college next year is already happening, and in many cases, notifications, all that stuff is coming out. But it's always important that you check in with your counselor and just get some of those little things taken care of. Letters of recommendation, transcripts, all that stuff. Or even if you're going to a 2-year college, making sure that you got your testing and all that stuff in place. Or if you're going to go into the trades, make sure you have a plan with that approach. If you can go into the military, again, have a plan. That's the key thing here, is having a plan. Or if you're just going to go straight into the job market as well, making sure you have a plan. So again, hopefully you took advantage of some of those breakout rooms. All right. What I'm going to ask for you to do is maybe put into the chat, or you can unmute as well. I have a question. Not every day am I going to have a question which you put into the chat or verbalize it, but here, if we're looking at going into a civil war here, what we think about is governments, all right? And so here, to think about, it can be about civil war or it can be about government in general. But look at this question: what makes a government legitimate in the eyes of the citizens? All right, so take some time, respond, put into the chat or unmute. What makes a government legitimate? So I think you have to look at what is meant by legitimate, or what your definition of legitimate is in the eyes of citizens. So are you thinking about that? Just a few quick announcements. Make sure that if you haven't, please fill out getting to know activity. Especially, I've looked at a few of them, and concerns that you may have for this trimester. Hopefully, as the trimester goes, I'm addressing them and alleviating maybe some of those concerns as well. And then again, kudos for those who have resubmitted your IA. But I just sent out a message before class about turning in the IA. So let's please do that as well. And you can do that on that prep site that I created. All right, so does anyone have any response to this question? What makes a government legitimate in the eyes of the people? Okay. So in the chat, we're looking at it's recognized. The government is recognized by the people and recognizes the government's authority. Okay. All right. The idea of a common cause, true, can be very, very important here. What is going to be guiding? I think we might look at this. This is a mission, a goal of, and if we think about our own presidents, they kind of come in with an idea of an agenda for their administration, maybe some big overarching idea, and then just trying to get people to buy into it. All right, and the more that people buy into it, the more unified we are. Okay. Anyone else want to weigh in on this? Okay. Again, and I think, that's a really good point about government provides the citizens with rights and benefits that are tailored to the needs of the citizens. I mean, again, I guess if we look at it and we go back to, again, our own country, we can use that. Back to the days of this idea that early on, government needs to respond to the needs of the people. And if the government no longer responds to the needs of the people, a change needs to happen. Well, usually when we talk about change, hopefully through the ballot, through voting, but maybe some recent events may have indicated otherwise. All right. So it needs to have organization, influence, support of the people. Definitely, if it looks like the government officials are just winging it, that's probably not a good thing. There's got to be some coherentness to it, to their approach, perhaps, and to their policies. And the thing that can be difficult, though, is if you are going to perhaps constantly change who your leaders are, that could in some ways hinder continuation over time, consistency, all that. We also know that maybe if people are in positions for a very long time, there's a sense of familiarity, but also being comfortable. And that may not necessarily be a good thing. In the span to dial it in or bring it to the Spanish Civil War, Francisco Franco is going to lead Spain to 1975. So I guess maybe one would say that Spanish people were very comfortable with him. Perhaps, we'll put asterisks by that. But also the fact that maybe Franco, by the time he does pass away, there was a sense of being comfortable and maybe don't have to work as hard, perhaps. I mean, we can really dig into those layers there as well. But again, thank you for those who have put into the chat your responses. That's good. So today I want us to focus on the Civil War itself, its course. Before we get into that, though, I do have a video clip on Francisco Franco, who is going to emerge as the leader of the nationalist forces. And the nationalist forces are, and you'll hear me repeat over and over again, they are on the right side of the spectrum. Many of the nationalist forces belong to the Falange Party, which is the party of Francisco Franco as well. They are fascists in their ideology. And so Francisco Franco does emerge early on as the early leader here. They're going to be going up against the Republican forces, and sometimes the Republican forces, like in my day, we learned that as loyalists, but Republican loyalists are the same. They are left-leaning in their ideology, and they can be socialist, they can be anarchists, simply anti-fascists as well. But we're going to watch a little video clip here first, and then jump into the assignment, or at least clarify maybe some things about that assignment. All right, so let me get my little video clip here going. Like anytime we watch some video clips here, in this case, we'll see the upbringing of Francisco Franco, but there still will be some graphic moments to it, imagery as well as language. And this video clip, I'd say, is probably about 15 minutes. So it's going to be one of our longer video clips here. But it's going to give us that historical context that we need to have if we're going to understand a little bit of what goes into his thinking as he approaches the Civil War, and then maybe down the road governing Spain.
The roots of Francisco Franco's dictatorship lie within deep divisions in the Spanish nation and within his own family. Born in 1892, Franco is the 7th generation of a naval dynasty. For almost 2 centuries, his family has sailed for the legendary Spanish fleet. Francisco dreams of joining them, but it's not to be. In 1898, when Franco is 6, Spain goes to war with the United States over control of Cuba. Spain's navy is devastated. When the Spanish-American War ends, the country has lost Cuba, Puerto Rico, and almost all of its empire. It is a wrenching and humiliating amputation.
There was an identity crisis if you didn't have an empire. It was a cultural, political trauma for families related to the military, for the military and the political elites, for the government.
As Spain's empire falls to pieces, so does Franco's home life. His father, Nicolas Franco, is a naval officer and a notorious man about town, known for his womanizing and drinking.
I think a lot of Franco's problems derive, of course, from the family dynamic. His father despised him. He had 2 brothers, and his father massively preferred the other 2. Franco's mother was a very strict Catholic. Franco was the mummy's boy. These 2 things, I think, created a sense of vulnerability, but also a sense that he had to prove himself.
Franco will adopt his mother's deeply conservative vision of Spain and devote his life to making it a reality. Yet he also wants to please his father, and that means a career in the military.
The problem with Franco is that he really wanted to be in the Navy. The Naval Academy was closed because Spain has lost most of its fleet in the war. So he has to settle for infantry, which was far less prestigious.
1907. Franco enters the Toledo Military Academy determined to be an officer. Small for his age and conspicuous for a high-pitched voice, he endures severe bullying.
Well, Franco was a very small person, and one of the ways in which he coped with being in the army was by creating a series of myths. And throughout his whole life, Franco was a bit like the Wizard of Oz. He was somebody who hid behind a series of masks.
When Franco graduates in 1910, his ambitions define him as much as his uniform. Spain's military class is obsessed with restoring the nation's prestige. For a young officer, the best place to start is in one of Spain's remaining colonial outposts, Morocco.
In Spain, in the peninsula, if you were an army officer, promotion was incredibly slow. It was dead men's shoes. Franco chose to go to Africa because it was the best place to get quick promotion.
1912. Moroccan rebels have launched a violent campaign to force the Spanish out. Lieutenant Franco is assigned to Spain's Army of Africa, a battalion of native Moroccans used for the fiercest fighting.
Going to Africa, he was lucky, didn't get killed, meant the possibility of rapid promotion. This is what Franco and many other officers did. They became high-ranking officers within years. If they survive.
The Army of Africa has a name for young officers like Franco: the betrothed of death. Of the first 42 officers assigned to the unit in 1912, only 7 are alive in 1915. And one of them is Franco. While fighting with the Army of Africa, he employs a tactic that will come to define his dictatorship.
Terror is the indiscriminate and arbitrary use of force that can incite fear in the hearts of people.
These acts of terror are public. They're meant to be public. They're meant to be seen.
The experience in Morocco, the experience of colonial war, which is war without limits. Completely wild war against civilians, where torture and mass killings are allowed. These definitely shape his character.
His unit becomes infamous for its bloodthirsty tactics.
They cut the ears and the noses of their Moroccan rebels. They take pictures of themselves with these trophies. This is a brutal war. And this is where this man is finding his personality, who he is.
Obviously, it would be impossible to know that Franco arrived as a young soldier in Africa, determined that one day he would be the dictator of Spain. It wasn't like that. But very soon we can see lots and lots of pieces of evidence of just how calculated he was.
Franco learns that fear can be useful with subordinates as well as enemies.
One of his soldiers refused to eat his lunch one day and threw it back in the face of one of the officers. Franco had that soldier shot, and then he forced the rest of the battalion to parade past the corpse of this dead soldier to remind them of the need for discipline.
Terror is his tactic, and the Army of Africa is his tool. One day he will use both to seize ultimate power in Spain. But in 1916, he has a young officer testing his limits and building a reputation for bravery.
To be courageous, you need to know fear. You need to have the imagination to know what you're letting yourself in for. And Franco, he was empty inside. He seems to have had little or no emotion. So when it said Franco is a man who knew no fear, I believe that. I believe he knew no fear. And that, to me, for what it's worth, is not courage.
In June, Franco's unit makes a frontal assault on insurgents' trenches.
This is very dangerous. And the sharpshooters of the rebels target officers.
Leading from the front, Franco takes a bullet. His unit loses 56 of its 133 men. And Franco is nearly one of them. At the time, an abdominal wound is often a death sentence. Against all odds, he makes a full recovery and is promoted to major. To his Moroccan troops, Franco's survival is a sign.
They started to say that he had baraka, like a sort of blessing, good luck. So they follow him blindly.
For Franco, it's confirmation that his life has a purpose.
That adulation persuaded him that he was someone special, that he'd been chosen, perhaps by Providence, perhaps by God, to help Spain.
In a very famous interview, he said, "Without Africa, I do not know how to understand myself."
Franco's African experience is also an opportunity to enhance his reputation.
In Morocco, you have this group of embedded journalists who are quite pro-war, who are there to promote, to make popular the cause of the war among the Spanish public. They have been sent by the newspapers from Madrid, from Barcelona, from the provinces, and they are looking for heroes.
Very early on, he began to cultivate journalists. Say about 1916 onwards, there are more and more articles about him.
It became very political as well, because there is one thing is the officer in combat, and the officer tells the story of the combat. And Something that Franco learned very early is how to please the press with the right stories.
The national right-wing newspaper starts to refer to him as El As de la Legión, the ace of the Legion.
In 1926, Franco is promoted to brigadier general. At 33, he is the youngest general in all of Europe. The bullied little cadet is a certified war hero. Africa has given him the respect he craves and the tactics that will mark his rise to power. But now, at the peak of his career, a tide of political change could destroy his dreams for Spain. The convulsions of the First World War and the Russian Revolution of 1917 have transformed European society. By contrast, with its enduring monarchy, Spain seems tradition-bound. The population is largely rural, and the Catholic Church a powerful force. But even here, change is brewing.
The country was industrializing, the country was becoming more urbane. There were huge pockets of poverty, very strong social inequalities, and the political system was problematic.
The gap between rich and poor is a fault line that divides Spanish society.
Those who have knew what they had and they knew how to go about keeping it, whereas all those who wanted to change things all had very different ideas.
Inspired by Russia's communist revolution, many turned to socialism, which is sweeping countries like France and Germany. Others look to the fascism of Benito Mussolini's Italy. Some blame the Catholic Church for complicity in maintaining an oppressive status quo.
You go into Spanish churches and they have, gold altars and so on, in places where the people were starving. This created huge hatred.
Anarchists want to tear down the existing power structure.
So all of this is happening, and for people like Franco and traditionalists, those kind of related to the military, this is really absolutely beyond the pale. This is not what they want. They're looking back to an imperial Spain of centuries gone, where there was hierarchy, where people knew their place.
April 1931. Support for the monarchy is plummeting. Facing a possible insurrection, the Spanish king agrees to step down.
King Alfonso XIII steps down in 1931 because the country rejects him.
He didn't have the support of sufficient numbers of old Spain. There was an awful lot of animus against Alfonso XIII, not against the monarchy so much as against him personally. So there's a sense of new constituencies knocking on the door of an old system and wanting some kind of representation.
Within months, a new republic is formed and a left-leaning government established. A new constitution guarantees a free press and regular elections. Every Spanish adult, man or woman, can vote. But not everyone is celebrating this tide of change.
Franco had an idea of the authentic Spain. It was Catholic, it protected property, protected the sanctity of marriage. All of these things were challenged by the left.
The left threatens his vision of Spain. Soon, he'll have the opportunity to strike back. November 1933. Spain swings to the right. as a coalition of conservative parties wins the next election. Franco, the hero of Africa, is promoted to Major General. But almost a year later, socialists and anarchists stage a massive strike in the coal-rich region of Asturias, in the northwest. The right-wing government turns to Franco, who welcomes the chance to restore order.
Communists and socialists offended him in a way automatically. He was very religious, very Catholic. He saw people on the left as atheists who did not believe in God.
To warn the left against further acts of rebellion, he turns to a tactic used by other would-be strongmen.
So for Franco, terror is a form of communication. You don't have to attack every single person who belongs to these organizations. If you use terror against some of them, it sends the signal that anyone whose loyalty goes to these leftist movements is going to be in trouble.
He ordered troops from the Army of Africa to go to Asturias. By doing that, he knows that it's going to take there troops that are ruthless, very violent.
Franco's troops round up more than 3,000 Spaniards and gun them down.
That was a symbol of his ruthlessness. He had the coast bombarded by the Spanish Navy. He had the mining villages bombed by the Spanish Air Force.
30,000 prisoners are transported to colonial territories outside Spain to serve their sentences.
He did what he had been doing in Africa. It was mass repression. It was colonial war, basically. But for this first time, it was colonial war that was applied in the metropolis. It was no longer a war against the Moroccans. It was war against the Spaniards.
And it was not just an opportunity to prove himself militarily. There was also an element of politics in that. So it was kind of his first taste of politics, a chance for him to prove himself in a sphere that was beyond the purely military.
It also gave him the conviction that he was the man that could save Spain from all these challenges from the left.
Franco suppresses the uprising, but his tactics trigger a political explosion. Left-wing parties are
All right. So that's all we'll watch from that little clip about Francisco Franco. So it definitely shows his rise to power, or at least his rise to prominence, that he becomes really a household name amongst the Spaniards, and gives us that historical context that is important to put it into perspective a little bit. His rise and then eventually his role in the Civil War. And I appreciate a lot of good comments in the chat as well. And that last comment, seems kind of counterproductive. Well, when he wants to make a point, he's going to make a point, and the use of terror and force will be a key element of it. And destroying the infrastructure and the region is secondary to the main goal. And the main goal is about power and maintaining the status quo and undoing whatever the left-leaning government had tried to do, and also show support of the right-leaning government that was in power at that time. All right, any other takeaways that we may have from that little clip? I mean, hey, Francisco Franco, rough upbringing, and we'll find that is consistent with others. Franco had a tough relationship with Dad. Adolf Hitler's going to have a tough relationship with Dad. Benito Mussolini's going to have a tough relationship with Dad. Joseph Stalin has a tough relationship with Dad. There's a theme here, a theme that definitely probably wouldn't find itself in a Disney cartoon, but the upbringing of these individuals definitely will help shape their character and maybe how they interact. So when we think of Francisco Franco today, he still has some relevancy today in Spain. What we find is a couple examples. They are still finding victims of the Spanish Civil War, and then also the years after when Franco was consolidating and maintaining his power, and he took out his political opponents and anyone who supported the left-leaning regimes became victims. And so he is going to have somewhere from 300 to 500,000 victims here during his time, and they have been finding mass graves. And since 2000, they have opened up about 740 mass graves and identified close to 10,000 victims. But they also know that there's about 2,500 mass graves that could contain well over 100,000 victims as well that still need to be identified. So Civil War is happening between 1936 and 1934, excuse me, 1936 and 1939. Got to get my math right here. But there's still victims of that war, and then the years after that haven't been identified or even haven't been located. So we have that. That shows a little bit of the far-reaching effect of Francisco Franco. But then also in 2019, they moved his body from this giant monument to the Civil War and the nationalist forces, and they removed his body, and so they exhumed it and put it next to his wife in a small cemetery, and that sparked backlash. It was a socialist government that took the initiative to do that. Their thought was to amend from the past, but as we see in Europe, there is a rise to right-wing parties, and in Spain, I think it's called the Vox Party, really used this as a moment to speak of nationalism and the positive things that they view that Franco had done for Spain. So there was a backlash to it, and still showed how strong people of Spain have about Franco. So big stuff there. All right, just quickly here, the assignment, which is going to be due tomorrow, Spanish Civil War in 10. Again, it's been opened up. I opened it up yesterday, almost right after class got done. So what you're doing is you're looking at 10 events, Spanish Civil War in 10. You're looking at 10 key events that ultimately ends with the nationalist forces winning here, or Francisco Franco's forces winning. And what you need to determine with these events is first get a basic understanding of what they are. Just quickly, get an understanding. You can use chapter 11 in our textbook, and you can find chapter 11 in the course resource folder and use that, or also use the handout that I attached to the assignment. So those are your two big ones. And again, if you can't figure it out from those, then GTS it, Google that stuff. So look at the key event, get a basic understanding. Then you need to determine if Franco or foreign influence or division within the Republican forces really contribute to the outcome of this event. And so like that first event here, August 1936, Franco's forces airlifted to mainland Spain from Morocco. Well, I think you have to look at who airlifted Francisco Franco's forces, and we'll find out that the Germans had a big role here. This war presents a great opportunity for Hitler and Mussolini to test their military, and especially for Germany, their expanded Luftwaffe, their Air Corps, and they will transport Franco's forces. So you can arrive at that in this first one here, foreign influence here is going to have a big role in the outcome, and it's Franco's forces were airlifted into Spain with German transport aircraft. And so this is a key example of foreign intervention. And that is also a key thing that we want to point out when we look at civil wars, is the role of foreign intervention. Just like we did in the Chinese Civil War, we want to do that with the Spanish Civil War. So you got these 10 events here, and really 9 now, since I did the first one here. I gave you the first one as an example. And then we want to take a look at, why. Why are the nationalists successful, and why the Republicans or the Loyalists are not going to be successful here? What were some of their strengths, weaknesses? And you want to use chapter 11 for that as well. And so here you want to look at national strengths. So we're kind of already arriving at they were perhaps stronger, maybe because of the political unity, military unity, economic advantages, and foreign assistance. And that's a key one, looking at foreign assistance. And then Republican weaknesses, why the Republicans lost the Spanish Civil War here, by analyzing the political disunity, military problems, economic problems, and foreign assistance. Their main provider is going to be the Soviet Union, but other countries may have played a role here as well, and sometimes that role could have hindered the Republicans. And then ultimately here, we're looking at to what extent did foreign intervention determine the outcome of the Civil War? So realistically, if you take away the foreign intervention, does that mean Francisco Franco doesn't win? And the Loyalists or the Republicans win, or vice versa, put in the foreign intervention, and that is the secret here, or that's the what we'll refer to perhaps maybe as the ultimate determining factor here. Struggling with my particular words I'm looking for, but take a look at that and analyze it and make a determination. So with that, this is your assignment. Work on it the rest of the class period today. We'll have some time tomorrow as well in class to work on it. It is due tomorrow. I'll take a little bit of time tomorrow, maybe less time tomorrow, and give you a little bit more time to work on this particular assignment. All is based on what happens in the front end of the class here. Okay, so with that, do we have any questions about this assignment? All right, and so what I'll do is I'll keep this Google Meet open, but if you do not have any questions, you can exit and have a great Tuesday here, and I'll see you tomorrow.